I'm going to get everyone to give a kind of brief introduction into who they are and what it is that they do in the world of African architecture and design. So to set us off, Greg, are you happy to take us away?
Yes, I am. If we can get the presentation up. Okay, I think I'm going to stand so I can see the screen. So thank you, everyone. It's great to be here and to talk about what we do and what we've been doing in Africa. I'm going to. This slide has a building some of you who've been to Lagos recently might recognize, called King's Tower. I'll finish the presentation with a bit more information on it. So we're Cape Town based. There are about 260 of us in 4 companies. We realized quite early on that one of the problems we have, which is, I think, a problem that many of us have on the continent, was simply a lack of capacity. And we'd always wanted to be able to design and control spaces, not just do architecture. We wanted to kind of deliver built experiences. So we built SAOTA, and then we built Arc because we were having problems with interior designers. So we built an interior design company, which actually can do architecture and does decor as well. This is a project for a lodge in the Kruger Park. And then we struggled to get furniture. Stuck. Do you want to move it on? There we go. You know, buying furniture that's made in Europe or the US is expensive, and there's not a lot of local capacity. So we built a company called Oka, which designs and manufactures in Cape Town. This is some of the stuff we do. And as we kind of moved along in our path, down our path, one of the things that happened is the whole kind of internet explosion and us working in other parts of the world. And we started using 3D technology, and we built a company called Tenebris Lab, which has built some multi-user virtual reality software, which allows us to get people into kind of digital spaces, both in the studio in Cape Town and then remotely. So we can have somebody in Cape Town and somebody in Lagos or Los Angeles in the same model with us. And that's been a really amazing jump for us. So this is our start, is working in this kind of high-end residential market in the Cape in South Africa. We've done other stuff as well in Cape Town. This is a little. We have a. One of the issues we have in South Africa is education. So one of our social engagements is around education. We've got a whole lot of students going into architecture school in the Cape. This is an area in Cape Town called Wallisdean, and we've got involved in an early childhood development project. And this is a school we've designed, and I'm going to be sending all of you emails looking for funding. You know, good architecture is a really empowering thing for people. It gives people a vision of what's possible. And one of the problems we have in South Africa is just is a very oppressive built environment. You know, it's not an enabling environment for anyone. It doesn't empower anyone. It kind of locks people into poverty. And it's a big challenge for our governments, because a lot of them haven't woken up to the power of built space. At the heart of our architecture is an attempt to create spaces that are ambiguous in terms of the way they connect internal or relate to internal and external space, and spaces that have a very powerful connection with the landscape and the environment. So this is a house in Cape Town. Cape Town has mountains kind of towering up above it, so views up into the sky are powerful. What's been quite exciting about this project is also just understanding how much goes on in the sky. You know, seeing the sun and the moon kind of move over you is really been interesting. A lot of the continent has very nice climate. So this kind of approach where you're really just putting a hat on a block of space and letting people live quite freely under it and able to move in and out has been a strategy that's worked quite well. This is a time lapse from the inside of the space. Yeah, so having these connections to natural cycles is something that you'll see in a lot of the projects. And then the cycle kind of repeats. So what kind of came out of doing this residential work and doing it some of our first projects out of South Africa were in Senegal. And we had our Senegalese client, we did the Radisson there, and we did a house for him, and then he asked us to do a house in Geneva, which got picked up. Somebody in our office sent some images out to one of the big design blogs, and it kind of started, it kind of illustrated a path for us to connect with people around the world. And so we're busy now on 5 continents, and we're busy in about 25 countries across the continent. And it's been an amazing experience because it's in terms of working in Africa, it's Africa to Africa business, which is a critical aspect of, what's a critical thing we've got to start getting right. And having a kind of pan-African footprint has also allowed us to knit networks across the continent and work them. What's happening on the continent is really exciting. You know, the future is African. There's this huge growth in population, which will swell to over 4 billion. And the last well of young people is going to be African. The last big market is going to be African. The last big resource of young people to power other people's economies is going to be African. And you're starting to see that manifest across the continent as kind of this converts into, there's this kind of contrast between new and old. Our work across the continent often continues to be in the residential space. This is a project in Nyanyuki just below Mount Kenya in Kenya. These are renders, by the way. It's about to start construction. So this sits on an amazing site. Again, many of the same kind of themes that you saw in the Cape Town house about this ambiguity between inside and outside, this borrowing of space, and lending of space between spaces. Quite a simple materiality, letting landscapes and letting sky kind of be the main part of the story. This is a really exceptional site. We've also, from this kind of residential work, done quite a lot of hospitality work. Again, this is for for a Senegalese group who are building about 16 3-star hotels across largely Francophone Africa. This is the first one that's up and running in Conakry, which was quite a challenge. And their projects are nearing completion in Douala and Abidjan. This is the one in Douala. It's actually almost built. This is the render. And this is another type of building, an office building. This is a project for a corporate headquarters in Luanda in Angola. And then onto the, what I think is one of the most exciting cities on earth, Lagos. It's an extraordinary city. In the 50s, there were about 250,000 people there. It's got maybe 22 million today. And it's probably going to be the first city to go past 100 million. So it's really going to be one of the most important cities on the planet. You can kind of see the densities between 1990 and 2015 from Lagos kind of around into the Delta. And it's just an extraordinarily energetic, alive city full of opportunity. For those of you who've never been to the city, it's made up of a set of islands that have kind of been connected together over time. This area at the bottom is a big reclamation project called Eco Atlantic. It'll end up, I think, being about 8 square kilometers with about 100 kilometers of road network on it. It's really a big beast. Our project is King's Tower up at the top there in Ikoyi. So we wanted this. We were asked to do an office building in Lagos, and we started kind of talking about what an office building in Lagos should look like and what kind of references there were. One of the things that's really nice about Lagos's climate is these really wonderful breezes. So there are these little boats, sailing boats on the lagoon, and we really like the way the sails kind of swell in the breeze. Lagos is tropical, so you want to shade the building to reduce the solar load on it. So this was an important reference. And we came up with a building that had this facade of this kind of layered facade with these aluminium shields on them, which keep the sun off the building, but also kind of have these references back to, I suppose, pattern and fabric. They're quite subtle, hopefully. And then this is the building in context. So it's kind of quite different to anything else in the city. That's it there. That's it. So that's a little bit about us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Greg. Hicham, would you like to do a little introductory spiel? I think you've also maybe got some visuals coming.
Yeah, the images for coming. I would like to thank Lola for this wonderful event as a founder and all the team to be guest here in London. And to be with Africans, talking about our continent and what's happening there, and how much we have talent and how much it's important to focus on this continent. As an international designer and an interior architect, I have 24-year background in this world. 18 years background international designer. I start to work with some important and very interesting brands. Internationally, they are collaborating with some designers from different parts of the world. And also, in my country, the Kingdom of Morocco, I'm one of the most influent and pushing design in the country and outside the country for the continent. And doing several projects in Morocco, working for government offices, states, and working on several projects for highways, urban furnitures. I just had the chance to be the designer of the first high-speed line train station of Africa. It was a vision and a very powerful project created by our king. It's 200 kilometers between Tangier and Casablanca. 4 huge, important, not only train station, but we can say new places of life, because you have food courts, you have shops, they are going to build hotels and several things. And I participate with architects Moroccan architects to be designer of several important spaces in those train stations. And also, actually, I'm designing some project for international hotel groups in Morocco and also outside the country in Africa. Actually, we are discussing to start a project in 2 countries in our continent. And if I can say, I have a global design agency with my team, and we are doing, like we say, 360-degree design solutions. Because when you are designing the center of the problematic, it's the user and how you can find solution for the user. When you're designing a bottle, when you create a brand, when you do signage for cities, when you create urban design solution, when urban furniture for cities, and how you can also have a rule to be influent and to talk with elected people, politics, because we do that as an architect and designer. We talk with people from the public sector, and we can be influent to tell them how much we are trying not only to design project, but to give solution to help for maybe problematic that they have for there is a lot of problems in the cities, and how architect and designer can give solution to think about the future, sustainability, and a lot of things. You know, there is a lot of examples that we can say about this, but and also in other part, I know the continent. I travel a lot in our lovely continent. It's very big. I don't know the 54 countries, but I know a lot of countries. I love the food. I love traveling in Africa. I love the gastronomy. I love to feel the music. And I like also to learn how much before colonization was existing a lot of civilization and empires in Africa, and how much we influence the world. But the thing are not in the universities in Europe. It's time to teach that to the people, that Africa, since a while, give a lot to humanity. Not only we have petrol or diamonds or those things, but we before colonization, it was empires. It was huge cities. It was a lot of things that now it's time to understand. And this is what I'm doing as a designer, to understand more my continent, to be the best ambassador outside my continent and inside my continent, to try the best in the humble way to talk about what we can do to promote themselves. And this is what I'm doing at my humble level, because I am also founder of Africa Design Days. It's a humble platform that I created 5 years ago in 2014 in Africa Design Award, to promote young designers and also to connect them with famous designers. And I have been elected in October 2017 as second African of the history in 62 years of the World Design Organization. This is the most influential and the powerful organization in the world. The first African have been elected is the Professor Mugendi Mrita from Kenya, and he's a very well-known. He was doing research and professor in Peninsula, Cape Town University in South Africa. Now he returned back home to Kenya, and he was the first African president of this organization from 2015 to 2017. And after him, I'm the second African. So I'm trying the best that I can, because we travel a lot all over the world to do our board. Our next board is going to be in Ljubljana in Slovenia. And for sure, during the board, everybody is saying, Hicham, Mr. Africa, talk. And I never stop to talk about my continent, how much I'm proud about our talents. So I will let to Papa to speak, and after we can see the images, and I can follow up after to say some words. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hey, India, everybody. I think I spoke a little bit earlier about one of the projects that we're doing, and there's some, I like the drums, and there's actually two projects that we're currently working on in the lobby area, which I encourage everybody to have a look at. I'm just going to talk a little bit about really about what our approach is and where our focus currently is, which is really about creating public spaces, creating architecture that is really about participation. And the company's organization is called MOE Plus, artArchitecture. The plus is to sort of indicate how we want to see the people that come into our office. So it's not necessarily about being an architect. It's really what else are you? So in our office, we have people who are musicians, who are researchers, who are writers. We have somebody who's an amazing cook. And this idea that, you know, we're looking at design and architecture in our specific context that encompasses a broader experiment in order to find a new language, as opposed to approaching it from a position of this is what architecture needs to look, sound, feel like in this context, as opposed to discover it. And the premise of discovery for us is the relationship between art and architecture, and how we can look back historically in terms of, for instance, in Yoruba, Benin kingdoms, you know, what a door represented, how we used to eat, the objects that were around the house, and how these objects in themselves manifested themselves as what we consider now to be works of art, even though they were part of our everyday environment. So it's about, for us, creating work that speaks to that tradition and looks at it in new ways for a contemporary young community that is participating in the development of not just the city and the environment, but also the narrative and the language of what architecture and design can be. A great example is outside of our office. I think it was about 2 years ago. The girls in the office used to complain, and they didn't want to sit in the particular chair in the office, which was looking out into this strange corner of the street, where we discovered the reason was that it was where all these guys would go and urinate. And we just wonder why all the girls, just like at certain times of the day, just like rolling their eyes. And so we were like, okay, how do we kind of maybe use design to change behavior and take this place away from a place where everybody feels they can come in the middle of the day, in the afternoon, and ease themselves, as we say in Lagos, and do something interesting. So we came up with this idea of a series of installations over a number of weeks and months, and the idea was to experiment. So it was like, okay, what happened if we turned it into a garden space? So we'd go there, we'd plant like lots of flowers, and then we would like watch what the reaction is. And then another day we would go and would get all the malams, which are the local gate men that look after all the different homes on the streets. We get them to participate, to paint the wall into a mural. And we kept trying these things out. And what we found out is the more and more that people saw that this experiment included the locality and the people around, and they saw that it was a project that wasn't about saying that, oh, you must do this. It was about, hey, guys, how about we try this out and see if this works? And what we found after a while is that, and I think it's something that we talked about in the discussion with Yinka, is about the idea of people taking ownership and how important that is in doing any project for us, is the idea of getting people to participate in order to take ownership and to feel part of what it is that a city like Lagos is becoming, and how that in itself can really enhance not just people's lives, but enhance the idea of what design can be and what it can lead to. So really, that's sort of where we are and the type of work that we're doing, which some of it is available for you to see in the lobby. So please check it out. And I'm sure we can talk a little bit more later on.
Great, thanks so much, Papa. And I think what is so great having all three of you here is that you are representing the kind of architecture, art and design world from three very different countries. And for me to kind of ask you all for a definition of like, what is contemporary architecture in Africa would be incredibly reductive. But coming from my perspective as a Western journalist, I know that when I started at Dezeen and we'd have kind of tags and categories for every country, we literally just had an Africa tag, which was terrible. And I've been trying to kind of separate those out and get each region represented. But what listening to all of you speak really has jumped out for me is that whereas in the West we're very caught up in the idea of the kind of glory of our architectural past, you guys are building the architecture of the future of a continent that is moving forward at such a rapid pace and that has such a kind of wealth of history to draw on, but one that isn't perhaps kind of there in textbooks ready for you all to find. So I was kind of wondering if you could talk to me a little bit more about how you build that vision of the future while drawing on the past. Is it easy? Is the material at your fingertips, or are you having to do a lot more digging? Hicham, if you want to speak, or do you want to go, Papa?
Yeah, I mean, materiality is a really interesting thing, and it's interesting in two ways, because there's the materiality of aspiration, which is a global thing. So when you're designing buildings, people's idea of the materials that they want to use are in themselves, like, you know, Greg raised some of these concerns in terms of importing very expensive materials from Europe. How do you deal with these issues when you're designing spaces, knowing that there's limited capacity to find local materials on ground? So for us, this importance of experimenting, looking at the past and the materials that we used in the past, and how you can redefine them and make them more contemporary in a newer way. And I mean, one of the things that's really great is terrazzo, which is, you know, I think if you think about it in the 50s, of 60s and 70s, it was really well. Most houses in Lagos and Nigeria used it as a flooring material. But then, you know, you move on to the 90s and the noughties, it's about Spanish and Italian tiles. And what you see is a younger generation of architects looking back at that material and finding ways to use it again in an interesting way, because it's something that can be done easier and locally. So I think that's an approach that you're seeing becoming more and more relevant and creating a newer, more interesting aesthetic. So that's from my point of view.
I think also, you know, it's difficult to kind of draw this back to kind of looking at cultural references. You know, Africa has got hundreds, if not thousands, of different societies and cultures who've kind of all got bundled up into a colonial construct. So most of our countries are extremely complex and layered. You know, it's easier in places like Europe where there are more. It's more kind of or historically it's more monocultural to perhaps find references that you could move forward. So I think people. I mean, we work with very kind of broad brush strokes. A lot of Africa is also very forward-looking. You know, we find that people are looking for kind of contemporary solutions, and those solutions often do relate to responding to place and to climate and to dealing with practical issues around materiality and those kinds of things. People are looking for spaces that empower them personally. So I think there's quite a different, and I think the problem with a lot of that kind of Africa tag is also the expectation of what that means. You know, if you look at what kind of Western design journalists perhaps would bundle together as African architecture or modern African architecture, it's often very kind of simplistic in a way, you know. Yeah, I think it's kind of it's a work in progress. But it's an amazingly exciting time. And the other big thing about a lot of Africa is a lot of our cities are new. You know, you take a city like Lagos. Nobody's really from Lagos originally, and it's a real melting pot. And everywhere's like that. Nairobi's like that. Harare's like that. Dar es Salaam's like that. Luanda's like that. So these cities are kind of are finding themselves as well, and all of them are in transition still, and growing dramatically. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that, Hicham, about this massive infrastructure project that you're involved with. I mean, we're talking about the first high-speed railway station. What was it like to design that?
Yeah, but I just wanted. Papa was saying the things about inspiration, about material that we are using in our project imported from Europe. You know, it's a global economy everywhere. But I think the big problem and the huge things that we have to do for our continent is employment. It's creation of employment, of encouraging enterprises and to work together to build our continent. I love the idea of the South-South cooperation created from Morocco by our king, Mohammed VI. And the South-South cooperation is to collaborate together, to build together with respect. And we collaborate with foreign countries. But I think for employment and to help the growth of economies, we have to encourage innovation, to encourage our designers to use material or to use innovation coming from our countries inside our project. It's very important because when you see hotels, most of the hotel, when you go to Africa, it's a copy-paste of concept coming from Occident or whatever. There is no flavor, you don't feel anything, but sometimes they put some painting on the walls or 2 or 3 sculptures to say, hi, hello, I'm in Africa. But I think it's true, it's crazy. But I think it's very important to encourage our designers. So if you build a hotel, some architects maybe have the responsibility or interior architect to use a designer from the region or several designers, because those designers have enterprises. They work with craft people. We have a huge knowledge of craft in our continent. Depend the region you are, you know, it's completely big, but a big knowledge coming for old civilization. And now there are some designers in textile working on new things, and also in furniture, also in lighting, or different things. It's very interesting how they are working, and most of them are famous internationally. Most of the museums in the world are collecting pieces coming from African designers. So I think it's the opportunity when you build a huge project like offices or like hotels, because hotels for me it's global project where you have a lot of things. It's going to be a vitrine. We can show to foreign visitors, to tourists, to travelers, because we talked in the other panels about traveling in Africa. It's the opportunity to promote our creativity, our knowledge, our craft world, industry also. And also when I'm listening to Papa saying that some architects are coming back to use some local materials, it's good, because it's very important to keep in mind that we have several things. Even, for example, if I talk about Morocco with this also very old tradition of craft and the world of craft, a lot of architects are still using different kind of things coming from the world of craft in Morocco, and they export this knowledge in several countries, and a lot of designers that are using this. And actually it's interesting because we travel as a designer and architect a lot in the continent, and sometimes we have an influence coming from this country or this country, and we try to give a new vision of our project and how we can involve these connections that we have in our project. And I think it's, when we think architecture, when we think design, when we talk about this globally, it's completely connecting to economy, and we can help the economy to be much, much better, to build the schools, because for example in West Africa, specifically in the Francophone areas, there is no school of design. So this is a huge project that we can do. We have to create ecosystem of architecture design to be all connected, to help our government and politics from the private sector, public sector, and the private sector to know what we are doing. Because people that they have the power, the decision maker don't know sometimes what's happening, because not all the architects or designer have this capacity to go to talk. Hey, listen to me, I want to tell you that there is a lot of people that they can do this and that, and you know, we need to work all together to promote themselves and to show what we are doing. We do business, okay, but it's important, and this is my point of view. And I just want to say something because it's important. This is things that I'm doing not alone, but it's a project that I co-initiated 2 years ago with the publisher in Casablanca, Langage du Sud, the founder Patricia de Fever. And this is one of the rare books about design in Africa that we are actually promoting, and it's going to be sailing. You can find it everywhere. One version in English. This is the title, African Generation, The Power of Design, and also in French. And we are very proud that we have some huge name of design like Sir David Adjaye, we have Sheikh Diallo, we have Karim Rashid, we have Issa Diabate, and we have a lot of people doing a lot of beautiful projects in Africa and outside the country. So outside the country and the continent. So I think it's one of the projects that I'm promoting with my partners. I'm doing this because it's important to show what's happening in the continent. And thank you.
And that was interesting. You were talking about young designers and architects and education. Is there, like, what would you advise young kind of architects and designers who want to get more involved? Is there, you know, are there the resources that people need? What are there particular challenges? I mean, you were talking, Greg, about how when you were kind of starting out, you were having to set up kind of things. If you needed interior design, you'd have to set up your own interior design. If you needed furniture, you would set up your own furniture. Is there that kind of like DIY attitude that you're seeing?
I think so. I mean, I think you've got to take chances, and I liked what Papa said, you know, about exploring different or kind of integrating different themes or disciplines into practice. I think that is an avenue. It's a difficult environment to work in. So I think the more kind of open people are to working in different ways, the better. You know, there's a huge demand for architecture and architects. I think people just need to get out there, take some chances, and get going. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the landscape and you look at, say, the top fashion designers, I'm gonna just keep to Nigeria because I think that's what I know best. Think of the top fashion designers in Nigeria. Majority of them studied law in university. You know, like the musicians, most of them were in school doing engineering. You look at, you know, one of the most amazing young photographers like Ogumbanwo. He studied law. So I think, you need to and you have this massive young population that is coming up. And for you to not understand that there needs to be flexibility in the approach and try and create an enabling environment, even within the framework of such a strict discipline as architecture, and also recognizing that architecture itself is changing dramatically with the rise of technology, some of the like Greg mentioned the use of virtual AI, virtual reality in their work, and the importance of allowing people who may not necessarily traditionally see themselves as architecture recognize that it's about creating value in the built environment and finding perhaps different approaches, because we also have to recognize the discipline of the process of architecture is predominantly Western, and how traditionally people have built regionally, whether you're in Nigeria, Morocco, South Africa, Kenya, has not been allowed to be explored. So it's that exploration process that we need to really encourage. And by encouraging that, finding a new way that perhaps can add value globally.
Great. Well, I think we have time for some questions. So if any of you guys have questions for the panel or someone in particular, stick your hand up. And I think we've got some microphones running around.
Hi. One question I had is, obviously, one of the graphs that was shown to us was the population of Africa and how fast it is growing. And I was wondering, as architect today, in those countries and working all over the continent, is this something that is, in part of the, the development of those cities, thinking, okay, they're going to be that many people in 2020, for example, and the building and the structure and the commission and the government are thinking, about that population and where they will live in a couple of years?
I think, cities were caught off guard, but so a lot of cities have grown somewhat organically, and people have in places have been empowered to make their own decisions, and a lot of the cities are actually highly functional. There are very few cities in Africa where people are hungry, or they haven't got something to do, or they're not going to school. They don't look like cities in the West, perhaps. Where there have been big kind of state interventions like South Africa, it's been an absolute disaster because the cities, I think kind of empowering people, architects play almost no role in any city in Africa. Architects design hardly any buildings for anyone. Architectural practice belongs to the elite, like it really does everywhere else on the planet. I think if people can get, if new strategies can be developed, if people can be empowered to build their own communities and build their own infrastructure, there aren't really the state really does, not in almost no country on the continent has the capacity to cope with this burgeoning population. But that's not a negative. I mean, I think that's part of an exciting new world that's emerging. I think your world as a model doesn't really exist anymore. There are just too many people. In our world, you kind of see this fight for resources and diminishing resources. And you're starting to see that coming to you guys. You see people from Syria or Eritrea, or those are fights for resources and control of resources. So we're trying to kind of middle our way through those discussions and figure out how to do it. And I think a lot of us are actually doing it quite well. The movement on the continent is positive, not negative. And it's positive in almost every respect. And it's just not a story that people are, it's not that it's not being told, people are just not receptive to hearing it. So they're not listening.
Hello. I have a question around, it came up a lot around materiality. And yes, and the fact that there was a need to have material that were adapted to the local context of each of these countries. My question is, how has that really affected your practice as architecture now that you kind of, I'm assuming your training was very Western orientated. So how has that affected your practice, and how has that also affected the way, and that's probably to all of you, how has that affected the way you mentor other young architects and designers?
I think what is, and I think it was Swati that was here earlier, said something really interesting, and I think it goes for architecture as well, where I think culturally how we operate as Africans is we're helping somebody. I think that is a core aspect of our DNA. And I think what's interesting about, being an employer or a mentor is the fact that that has to be in your psyche as you're working. Once you detach yourself and see your employees as almost at a distance, or your end users as a distance, you're not really you're never going to solve that problem. And I think the idea or the issue that we have with infrastructure or materiality is, I think, post-colonial Africa and how it approached civic space and how it approached infrastructure and how it approached its resources was not part of how the traditional philosophy was. It wasn't that we weren't thinking about it in the same way. We were approaching it from very objective viewpoint. We weren't thinking about this road is my family. This water is for my auntie in this, or and I think there's a shift that is happening where, as people are, or rather when I'm thinking about design, or when we're thinking about design, we're thinking about, what's really great? If we engage with this artisan, we might learn something through that engagement, and there may be a shared knowledge, and we'll be able to give him work in terms of, instead of going to Italy or Japan to do something, we're working with this guy, and that knowledge share hopefully creates something new. And as long as we're able to sell that to the client, where the client can be like, oh, that's kind of interesting, we start to build this new momentum. So I think it's really critical to find ways to build new momentums, and that comes from really engaging at local sources and in doing it from a place of collaboration and partnership. And I think, one of the things we discussed in our office was how we were moving away from this idea of having employees, and we were looking at people that work with us as collaborators. And once we start to change the language and take on what we consider to be the reality of our context, which is like, there needs to be a mental shift, right? And that mental shift also has to do with language. And language is really, really powerful. And language is something within design that can be recalibrated. Excuse me, language is problem. Is problem. So I hope I answered your question a little bit in a very long, convoluted way. So I feel like there needs to be that give and take, that constant collaboration and participation. And that is to do with the earlier comment when we talk about things like mass housing as well. I mean, you think about someone like Francis Carey and how he's really pushing this idea of participatory build. And it's something that I think people are not really understand how amazing that could be, where you're, giving community the resources directly to them and saying that, look, build for your community. You know, that gives you ownership, you know, and that it's, you know, you empower people to empower themselves. So I think that's what's really exciting. And I think Greg is right, it's so exciting. Like, I wake up every day in Lagos, just be like, man, this place is crazy, but I can't imagine being anywhere else in the world. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Hi. So the question I wanted to ask, two questions, and I'll keep them really brief. First question is to Tayo, speaking about the retail spaces that are developing in Lagos and how the fashion landscape is influencing those buildings. And many people may know Alara and how it's become a destination space like Dover Street Market. And I think David Adaji did that building. And it's interesting to see how I think it stands out from all the other retail spaces in Lagos because it's so unique and it's so individual. But it's also interesting how, for the user, I think the stairs, people always comment how intimidating going up those stairs are. And I wondered if, you know, the architects didn't factor that in and how people use spaces in Lagos and aren't used to that type of space in a retail environment. So the question is just how you have seen retail space developing in Nigeria and where you see them going. Second question is about safety and governance and how architects, you know, factor that in when they are creating buildings in Africa.
I can answer the first part of your question about Alara and the steps. Have you ever been to Olumo Rock? So like for me, Alara is like climbing Olumo Rock. It's like, that is a shrine. You have to really, like, you know, I think that sometimes let's enjoy this experiment, you know. Let's enjoy this sense that, you know, when we think about the work that Greg's company is doing in Lagos and how it's creating opportunities in one way, and we look at a space like Alara and we're like, now how am I going to, you know, it's like, it's saying to you, please, if you can't climb the stairs, find your way, you know. And you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be retail as you know it. It can be retail as this experience wants you to see it. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. Has a question.
Yeah, you have a question?
Okay, so the question I really want to put to you is about the challenges of climate change and architecture. Because I'm doing a building right now in Lagos. And I just said to the architect, you know, I don't want a glass box filled with air conditioning. You know, I actually want you to use, you know, the environment. And we know, you know, we know about, you know, power outages in Lagos. We know about NEPA. And, you know, it's not easy. But then the climate can be used to actually operate, you know, the temperature of the building. And so, I mean, what strategies are you guys, you know, given the kind of challenges that we face now with climate change? Yeah, you know, just if anyone can take that.
Well, I'll start. I mean, we did that King's Tower building, for instance, where we're quite conscious of trying to put passive strategies in place. So it is essentially a glass building, but it has a system where the slabs on each level project about a meter past the facade. So the facade is actually quite a simple shopfront facade. It's not a complex curtain wall. The sun comes up into the sky very quickly in Lagos. So if you can shade your facade horizontally, you get almost no heat build-up on it. And then the screen kind of helped really really cement that idea. So there's almost no sun coming onto the glass. It's an office building, so there was a requirement from a commercial point of view to air condition it, but it kind of opens in 4 places across the facade. So you can simply open it up and get air to move through it. And there are passive strategies you can put in place to kind of cool the air as well. Lagos is interesting because it never actually gets that hot. If you look at the temperature itself, it's the humidity that's a problem. So if you get up off the ground a little bit and up into that breeze, it's actually often very pleasant and a very nice place to be. The other thing with regards to lighting was there's almost no requirement for lighting in that building during the day because we bounce so much natural light into the space. I think Lagos is one of Lagos's big challenge in terms of climate change is long-term is flooding. Yeah. There aren't easy answers to that problem.
I mean, just a quick one to add, I won't be very long, but a friend of mine actually said to me that the problem started with the West's introduction of electricity into Africa, and that actually traditional building, I mean, they had ways of actually cooling the buildings, within kind of traditional architecture, and so, electricity, I think, has kind of brought more problems in a way.
Well, it's quite interesting. I've got an old building in the Karoo, about 4 hours out of Cape Town, which is built out of cast mud. And the walls are about this thick with a thatch roof. And it can get up in summer, it can get up into the 40s during the day. But in the evenings, it comes down to about 18. And as long as you keep the building closed during the day, the temperature inside the building never gets up above more than about 24 degrees. So it's naturally air conditioned. And then at night, there's some of the heat radiates through the walls back into the space. So it warms up. So there absolutely are strategies and traditional strategies to deal with these kinds of things.
And I think, again, it's about, and you can see in a lot of the new designs or new projects that a lot of younger designers and architects or non-architects are sort of looking back at those traditional techniques and finding ways to make them more contemporary, recognizing the aesthetic aspirations that clients have or individuals have, but also being very conscious of things like climate change and the environment, not wanting to waste resources, understanding the importance of sustainability as an ethical lifestyle or ethical philosophy. So, but flooding is a huge issue. Flooding that has come about through illegal land reclamation, projects like Eco-Atlantic. Yeah, I'm not going to say any more, actually. So yeah, there's flooding is a huge problem, and the fact that a lot of Lagos is going to be underwater in the next 20, 25 years, and the strategies that we're going to have to look at to deal with this massive problem is of huge concern. I think to everybody from architects to the state and to the federal